On the internet, everybody is telling you that you need to find the right problem in order to make tons of money and build a successful startup. But the truth is that not every problem is worth it. In fact, most problems don't sell at all. And you need to figure that out early, before investing time, money and energy in building something nobody wants. I am Gabri, 27, from Italy. 2 years ago I had zero experience in business, but I decided to go all in. Now I'm running a 200k virtual reality agency and an early stage startup. In this video I'm gonna give you the exact checklist for understanding if your problem is worth it or is a total waste of time. Before building anything, you need to know what kind of product you are creating. In my opinion, products fall into main categories: painkillers and vitamins. Vitamins products are that product that are nice to have. It's cool to use them, but they don't solve a critical problem. For example, a fancy meal planning app. It's useful, but no one dies if they don't use it. On the other hand, painkiller products are those products that solve a critical problem. Something that must be solved right now because it's too painful to bear. For example, let's think at a small business. A small business needs to have a payment processing system right now because it needs to validate its product and make money. So they don't have the budget for building a custom big payment processing. They just need something like Stripe, something that is cheap and works out of the box. This distinction between vitamin and painkiller is crucial because it affects the business model you are creating. I think that vitamins are more likely to have an advertising-based business model because you can have a massive user base because a lot of people are using it, but it's hard to directly charge them. So maybe you can earn money by ads and advertising. On the other side, with a painkiller, you can directly charge the user because you are providing tangible value right now. If you're starting from scratch with limited resources, I would suggest you to start with a painkiller product because it needs less users to start and you can make more money easier. But in order to build a painkiller, you need a critical problem. Something that is so painful and so urgent, people are gonna pay immediately for having a solution. But how do you understand if your problem is a critical problem? Let's break it down. To know if your problem is critical, it must have these 5 characteristics. First of all, it must be painful. A critical problem is a problem that reduces the quality of life of your users. For example, in a B2C context, we can think about the sleep management and stress issue. Poor sleep impacts health, productivity, and relationship. So people can be willing to buy a solution to help them with this critical and painful problem. On the other side, we can think the problem that is not painful. For example, forgetting to cancel unused digital subscription. Yes, it can waste us a few dozen euros, but does not seriously affect health or important stuff. On the other side, we can think the not painful problem in the B2B context. For example, managing office supplies. If they miss, they can create a minor inconvenience, but they don't generate a significant amount of stress. So, bear this in mind. Pain triggers urgency and frustration, and the more stress a problem causes, the more critical it is. The second key characteristic of a critical problem is that it wastes time or money. A critical problem must drain resources while being unavoidable at the same time. For example, if we look at the B2C context, we can think at a freelance. A freelance must send and track invoices. It's something that you cannot avoid to do, but it is also something that is very time-consuming. On the other side, if we look at a B2B example, we can think about the energy wasted in offices and warehouses. For example, with the lights, air conditioning that remain on after hours or are managed manually. In this case, for example, some kind of IoT and software solution that automatically turn off all the supplies can be like very effective for the company in order to save some money. So just remember, optional or minor issues don't qualify. The cost must be real and must be felt by your user. The third characteristic of a critical problem is that people can't opt out. A critical problem forces action every time. It's impossible to avoid it. For example, if we want to look at a B2C context, we can think at chronic pains, like for example chronic back pain. It affects millions of people and it's impossible to overlook. People need a solution right now. Otherwise, their health, their sleep, their even relationships and social life can suffer. And most importantly, when they have back pain, their quality of life is immediately reduced. So you can start to see how these key characteristics of a critical problem can combine. Another example, this time in a B2B context, can be found in the GDPR compliance in European companies. European companies must comply to the GDPR created by the European Union. And this can be really hard and really tricky, because it's a huge amount of laws that company must be careful to respect. So some kind of automatic software that make all of your websites immediately GDPR compliant can be a really no-brainer, because this is a problem that European companies cannot avoid, because it's simply a law enforcement. The four key characteristics of a critical problem is urgency. A problem must be urgent. This means that whenever the problem occurs, it must be solved right now. It can't wait. And you need to bear in mind that frequency creates urgency. For example, let's look at a B2C context, like running out of clean laundry. If it happens once a year, it's a minor inconvenience, but if it happens quickly, it's a critical problem, creates stress and time pressure. So it's important to notice that frequency creates urgency. In this case, for example, an on-demand laundry subscription can be a solution for this critical problem in a B2C context. But as we have done before, let's look also at a B2B example. For example, let's think at an employee in a company that at every end of the day must fill a long form in an Excel page. It's something that must be done. It's not avoidable and it must be done every day. It's a massive waste of time. There is a high human error risk and a sales productivity killer. So in this case, maybe a software that automates this filling of Excel sheets can be useful. And here is the fifth characteristic of a critical problem. A critical problem forces people to solve it by using their own system. This is crucial, so pay attention. A problem is critical only if people are already trying to fix it. This is something that it was hard for me to understand, because I just thought that it was enough to find a problem. But life is just full of problems. Just some of them are not so painful. And the only objective way to understand if a problem is painful is that people are trying to solve it. They can't wait, they need to solve it now. And if there are no solutions in the market, they are trying to create their own solutions. Let's look, for example, at budgeting in personal finance, so a B2C context. People before apps used paper. They created their own system to budgeting, to managing their money. Or, for example, think at something similar in a B2B context, like, for example, project management tool. Now the market is plenty of project management apps like Slack, Asana, Trello, and so on. But before them, it's not that people weren't managing projects. They just were managing them with other solutions, like paper, for example. Paper is not so effective, so other apps and digital solutions came in. So here this extra tip. Complaints alone don't indicate a critical problem. Critical problem is something people are not still complaining, but they are taking action towards its resolution. Now I want to punctualize something. Critical is relative. If a problem is critical, it depends on your target and context. Let's, for example, think at B2B. When we think about businesses, the problems are always about time and money. Your solution needs to make more money or reduce the waste of time. If we think about customers, the situation is much more complicated because it involves the psychological of individuals. So often the problems are about status, self-improvement, relationships, health, and so on. So for a company, a critical problem is about cutting costs, like we said the example before, so optimizing the cost of lights and all of the office electricity stuff. But for user can be a bit trickier. For instance, we can think at the problem of loneliness. People right now feel really lonely. This is something that is not easy to measure in an objective way, but it's something people feel, and it's something people will be willing to pay for. Sometimes it's not the product that is wrong, but it's the target audience. So sometimes changing the audience can make a previously minor problem suddenly critical. Let's think at a cyclist. An amateur cyclist is not worried about the perfection state their bicycle. It just needs to go. But a professional cyclist must to check maybe every week the status of his bike. The bike must be perfect. So, for example, a solution, a service that provides regular checkup of the status of your bike can be interesting for a professional cyclist, but totally irrelevant for an amateur cyclist. So the problem is not your solution, but your target audience. So you need to understand this thing, because it's very important. How do you validate your problem? How do you understand if your problem is critical and if you can create a startup on top of it? In my opinion, there are 4 methods that you can use. The first one is user interviews and team experience. Talk to potential users or talk to that member of your team which is part of the target audience and so is expert of the problem. By the way, I've made a video about the roles that must be fit in a startup. Second strategy, check the market. Are there competitors in the market that are already solving the problem? Because you need to understand that the market can be either a red ocean when there are a lot of competitors or a blue ocean where there are no competitors. A blue ocean can be more full of opportunities, but it's also a big red flag, because if there are no solutions for a problem, maybe that problem is not critical enough. But on the other side, if there are many competitors, yeah, it can be a little bit harder to stand out, but your problem is already validated by the market itself. Third strategy, look for existing spending. If people are already paying for having their problem solved, that's a good sign. And be aware of expanding your understanding of solutions of a problem. And this relates to the job to be done theory. For example, an automatic driller is something that is a competitor to a stupid nail on the wall. They are totally different, and you would say that they are not even the same product. Yes, but they are trying to solve the same problem, hanging something on the wall. And the automatic driller can be better of the nail for some kind of specific target audience. Fourth strategy, launch fast, because you can think and rethink and overthink over and over, but the ultimate test is the market. So if you have an idea about a problem and about a product, just quickly create something, put it on the market and see how the market responds. And finally, I would like to give you an extra tip. Consider how aware people are of the problem. A solution to a problem is much easier to sell if your problem is easily measurable, like objectively, like using numbers. So you can propose your solution and you can show your target audience how your solution can be faster, can create much more quantity of something. You can use data to convince your target user. So I hope that now is clear the importance of finding a critical problem. Because if you miss this step, you risk wasting months on energy, money and time in building something that won't sell. Focus on critical problems. Make sure your product is a painkiller and not just a vitamin. And remember, the market is king, so always test. in the market. If this helped you, just hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. In the description you can find a link to my newsletter in which I share behind the scenes and tips on how to build a business that is aligned with your personal and life values. Thanks for listening and see you at the next video.